Awesome. Good stuff. All right, guys. Well, listen, thank you so much for joining us tonight, right? So thank you for giving me 60 minutes of your time. And it will be a tight 60 minutes. We've got a lot to get through, but we've got a specific focus on really starting to master your automation, specifically with the use of Ruby, with the use of Cucumber, and the use of Selenium WebDriver as well. So powerful combination we've been using for a number of years now. So we're going to show you exactly how you can have that same kind of success. Whether, as I said, in some of the marketing stuff, whether this is something you've just struggled with in the past, something, maybe you've evaluated other tools, maybe you've made some progress, but you've not quite settled on your solution yet. I'd like to introduce you to this way of working. I think it could make a difference. But as we say, if you have questions along the way, the schedule's going to be tight. So if you can use the Zoom chat function, I've got Dylan and Andy with me from Test Evolve, and the idea is we'll try and fire off a response to you immediately if you have a question when you hear something. So type it up, and we'll get a response back to you. Okay. All right. I'm going to turn off my camera for this point, but welcome. Let's dive in. Okay, so just in terms of agenda then, we are going to look at the basic setup that's involved. We're using the Test Evolve toolset. So we're going to introduce you to Test Evolve, Spark, Flare, and Halo. We're talking specifically about Ruby. We do support the use of JavaScript and TypeScript as well. We'll almost certainly do a separate session on that, possibly before Christmas, if not early in the new year. So we'll talk you through the setup that's involved. As far as the use of Cucumber and BDD, we'll take a bit of a deeper dive into what we consider to be, best practice scenario creation. So BDD, features and scenarios, looking at the layers of the framework and how ultimately that drops down to a page class format and a page object model, which again is kind of a best practice approach for your coded automation frameworks. One of the key things we're going to introduce you to is a new Test Evolve feature. It's the Cucumber Web Test Recorder. So this is a really nice feature of Test Evolve Flare, the first of its kind actually, that's going to allow you to record your web tests directly to your BDD, your Cucumber scenarios. So it's a really nice way of going from having nothing to having something fairly significant in a very short space of time. And of course, a test isn't a test until we've actually started adding some verifications, some checkpoints, some assertions. So we'll show you how we do that whilst we're recording tests and how you do that in a coded fashion as well. One of the things we've been focusing on as far as the product's concerned is allowing customers and partners to extend the reuse of their functional UI automated tests into other testing verticals, if you like. So the ability to use your existing tests to run an accessibility check, for example, or to perform a Lighthouse audit. So it's a really powerful feature when you can just drop that into a new test that you're creating there and then, or an existing test that you already have. So we'll look at that. Page object model, absolutely. We'll get into how that should work and why that's a good idea. And then ultimately we'll look at something that all testers should be absolutely concerned with, which is requirements traceability. Two things: testing transparency and requirements traceability. And that's absolutely one of the key things that the use of BDD and features and scenarios will help to give you that. And then from our point of view, the primary job of any testing practice, any tester, is really that of providing fastest quality feedback. So the concept that with automation, we don't need to wait an hour or 2 hours for that job to complete. If we've got 500 or 1,000 tests, we need to start seeing feedback from these automated tests in a real-time fashion as soon as we can. That's a brief overview of what we're going to cover off tonight. In terms of why, right? So let's talk about why Cucumber, Ruby, and WebDriver. So if you're getting started, you're new to this, or you're just looking for a change of language, Ruby is an awesome language to get started with, right? So it's a scripted language. It's great for beginners. It's a real gentle learning curve. We speak from experience, having been through this journey ourselves a number of years back now. Obviously, it's perfectly suited for Windows, Mac, and Linux, which is great. Debugging tests, so when it comes to writing tests or even troubleshooting maybe a failing test, the ability to run that test to a certain point, to pause, to debug, to let that test continue, to check some parameters. That's a really powerful feature, and it's not something we can do in JavaScript, for example. So, we really like that side of it with Ruby. Now, we're not going to talk about API testing tonight, but rest assured, you absolutely can automate your API testing with TestEvolve using Ruby as well. So we have certain libraries that we use. We do it in a programmatic fashion. But yeah, whether you've got REST services or SOAP services to test, we can absolutely do that. And that, I think, is made even more powerful when you wrap that in a BDD type of scenario as well, to expose an otherwise technical testing subject to a wider audience. So that's a really nice touch. And of course, with Ruby, we get a nice ability to run our tests in a kind of multi-threaded fashion, so parallel running. Now, typically, that might be running things on 8 threads, 12 threads, 16 threads, something like that, so we don't have to wait for these tests on a kind of sequential basis, one after the other. And really, that's a must-have, in this day and age for your continuous testing pipeline. Why Cucumber? Well, BDD with Cucumber, it's a great way to get buy-in from the business on your requirements, right? So if we think about what BDD really is, it's a conversational thing between developers, testers, business owners, stakeholders, business analysts, agreeing this set of features and scenarios, this functionality that's going to be developed within your application, with the peace of mind knowing that you are going to build your automated acceptance tests to match that exactly, right? We're using the same language, which is fantastic. When appropriate, it then does allow the relevant sharing of scenario steps, and I'll clarify what I mean by when appropriate a little later on. And then when we start looking at the use of Cucumber tables, that's a great way of then taking a single test and then being able to run that multiple times with the injection of different data sets, for example. So we'll look at that later on. And all of this together, you do get great transparency of your testing process, and again, traceability down to your source requirements, right? So the kind of scenarios you develop, you're going to have full acceptance of those scenarios from the business. Everyone's going to have a complete awareness of what's being developed and therefore how it's being tested as well, which is great. WebDriver, we are certainly looking at alternatives as well. This is still our de facto driver for now. We're looking at Playwright and Puppeteer. We're looking at Nightwatch. Obviously, many people are using Cypress, for example. But as it stands, it's great for local testing for all of these browsers, including IE, if you really need to go, that far back. So any local browser you've got on your machine, it's going to allow you to test with that. As of now, it is still really the only kind of officially supported driver by all of these main browsers, which I think stands for something. And when we combine that with one of the libraries we use called Water, which stands for Web Acceptance Testing in Ruby, that gives you a really nice wrapper around some of this raw Selenium commands, right? Really intuitive, easy to learn, very quick and easy to get up and running with it. Of course, we're here to talk about Ruby today, but there are bindings for multiple languages, as I'm sure you're aware. And of course, because of the time it's been around, massive amounts of community support, obviously continually developed. Lots of new functionality came along with Selenium 4. So it's just a really nice kind of trio of technology to work with. Okay, so let's just step out of this. So let's just talk briefly about the kind of recommended setup steps. So all of our documentation you'll find on testevolve.github.io, okay? And if you come in the setup section and we look specifically around Ruby, we've got sections here for Mac OS, Linux, but also Windows as well. So in short, in summary, for Mac users, we recommend coming over to rvm.io. So RVM is a Ruby version manager. So you can simply open up a terminal session, come down and look for this on the page, right? Install the latest stable. It's going to give you this command here. All right, so if you pop that in the terminal, that will install RVM, that will install a stable version of Ruby for you. And moving forward, that's going to be the same tool you use to manage different versions of Ruby. So you can have multiple versions installed at any one time. and it's going to allow you to chop and change between those versions as well. So that's a nice clean install. If we look at Windows users, we recommend you come to the rubyinstaller.org website. Okay, so just come in the download section. For now, we support up to version 2.7.4 of Ruby. We'll be adding support for 3.1.0 and up in the very early part of the new year. But Windows users for now, if you come here, you can come into the archive section. And in here, whether you want 64-bit or not, you will find Ruby 2.7.4 with the dev kit. Okay, so you come here and do the download from there. As far as actually getting into the code, so we'll look at the recorder, but when you start to refactor your code, when you start to become more competent and actually start to dive in, you're going to need a text editor or an IDE of some description. For a long time, we've worked with RubyMine from JetBrains, which is a fantastic IDE to work with Ruby. Of course, you could use something like VS Code, you could use Atom or any other text editor of your choice. So there's a 30-day free trial for RubyMine. You can just come here if you wish to give that a go. And finally, when you look at some of the stuff we do with the recorder, this is TestEvolve Halo. So this is our cloud dashboard reporting platform. So this is where you would come. Let's just log in here. We'll sign in to Halo, and in the top right panel there is a download section. And this is where you can come to actually download the version of TestEvolve Flare that you're going to need for your particular setup. So DMG for Mac, an exe file for Windows, or a zipped file for a Linux distribution. So these are the main things to think about when you're kind of getting set up to do this. We do have a series of tutorials and setup guides on our YouTube channel, so feel free to jump over there as well. Okay. All right, let's jump in. So we're going to look at now the kind of the detailed use of BDD and Cucumber. So I'm going to fire up TestEvolve Flare now. So this is our cross-platform studio application. So we sign in with the same credentials as we use for TestEvolve Halo. So I'll put my organization in, email. Cool. All right, we're in. Now, as soon as you open TestEvolve Flare, essentially you've got a choice of opening any existing projects. We're going to look at creating a brand new project. We're focusing on Ruby, as we know. So let's do this as webinar demo. So I'll just come in here. I'll give the project a name. I choose my directory. And I'm going to click on my Ruby tile there. As we say, we'll do a separate session on JavaScript, but that's going to work in exactly the same way. So I create this project. It's going to go through a number of system checks. It's going to look at my Ruby installation. After having followed the install guide, it will create everything that's needed in terms of setting up the automation project. It will look at the subscription information. So right now we have a 90-day free subscription on offer. So if you like the look of what we're doing here today and you want to sign up, you'll have 90 days in order to do that. And the project will then open. Okay, so the first thing we're going to see on the left-hand side, we have a number of example tests in a new project. Okay, so we have the idea of features on the left, we have scenarios in the middle. But what I want to show you to start with is how we start to build these out from scratch. Okay, so I come into the develop module within TestEvolve Flare. I'm going to create a new BDD feature. All right, so we're going to look at an e-commerce checkout flow today. We'll use Amazon, of course. We're all familiar with that. So let's call this an Amazon checkout flow. So the web recorder allows me to manage my features and my scenarios as well. Okay, so it's reading and writing from my file system. When I create my feature, then it's going to open up a new scenario for me. So we'll call this checkout. I'm going to call this step def for reasons that will become apparent. And then it's going to open me a new step, right? So within my scenario, I'm going to need to fill out the scenario steps. Now, we have support for all of the Cucumber keywords here. So given, when, then, and but. The idea of best practice BDD is that we create nice, concise, short, ideally 3-step scenarios. Okay, so a given step is always going to be your starting circumstance, the start point of your user journey. All right. Your when step will be a tangible set of user actions, and a then step should ultimately be some kind of assertion, verification step, positive or negative, right? So we're going to say here, so given I go to the Amazing, I should say Amazon, I have to pardon my typos. There we go. Given I go to the Amazon website, so I click on that, and it's then going to give me the chance to add a when step. So I'm going to build that out. So when I search for a product and add it to cart, let's just add a then step. Then I can begin the checkout flow. Cool. Nice and simple. So we keep it nice and short and concise and punchy, right? A good quality BDD scenario should be about the journey that you are trying to effect for the user. It should be about the end-to-end journey. It shouldn't be about how they go about achieving that journey, right? We try and keep aspects of the UI and the button clicks and the drop-down lists and the radio checks. We try and keep that out of our scenarios. We have that under the hood, okay? And one of the key reasons for that, okay, over time, this story will remain relevant. This story will remain completely valid, but the UI is going to change, right? Either through an intended change or through a regression, through a bug. Okay, so the more of the UI we include in our story, the more they're going to very quickly become invalidated. So when we just talk about the nature of the user journey, we don't need to concern ourselves with those changes to the front end. And the other thing is that anyone connected with delivery can look at a story like this and understand immediately, the feature, the function that's to be developed and how it's going to be tested. All right, good. So I'm going to open up that given step. It's telling me that the step is yet to be defined. Okay, so I can just come over here. I can click to begin recording. And you're going to see that it opens a browser within Flare. Okay. So the first step I'm recording my kind of interactions for is just to go and load that page. All right, so I'm going to fire my URL in here. Go code.uk for this first one. I'm going to click on this record button here, hit go, and it's going to do two things. It's going to load that page for me, and on the left-hand side, you're going to see that it's starting to record my my interactions with this web application. Okay. Now my when step tells me that's all I need to do is to launch the website. But actually, so I come into the when step. That was the given step. I don't need to stop and start recording. It just continues. Okay, so this is about searching for a product and adding it to cart. Okay, so I'm going to click in the text field. You can see that it's already recorded that interaction. I am going to search for Christmas trees, and I do actually need a new one. So let's see what it tells me. So I've submitted some text. I'm going to click on this magnifying glass. So 3 interactions there. It's recorded all of these on the left-hand side, which you can see. So I've got to click, I've got a set text method, and then I've got to click on the search button. Okay. Now, in the application itself, obviously, I've now been taken to a results listing page. So I might want to add an assertion here in this step, just to kind of guarantee that I'm on the page that I expect it to be. So for now, I'm just going to right-click on this this sort by element within the page. All right, that's an indication that I am where I need to be. So I'm going to do an element verification. I can check that it exists, it's present, or it's visible. So I'll do a presence check here. As I scroll down, maybe also this results header, that's a good indication that I'm where I expect to be. So I'll add another check here. And you can see that these verifications, these assertions, these checkpoints are being written to my project as well. Okay. Now, the other thing I had to do in this step, so I've searched for a product. I've now got to add it to cart. So I'm going to take this first results listing. Let's click on that. Okay, I've been taken to a new page. And then let's add it to cart. I'm on a new page, so I'm just going to add in another check. So maybe I check that the presence of the add to basket button. That's another indication that I'm on the product details page now, is where I need to be. And then my final step in this when step is the actual adding to cart. So I'll come here, and click on the add to basket. All right, so that's everything I need for my when step. I can just come over and click in my then step, and this simply says, and I can begin the checkout flow at this stage. So again, in terms of doing that, I've been taken to effectively a basket add confirmation page. So let's add another assertion here on this message. I'm going to check that that exists. I'm also going to check that my go to basket button is present. Now we'll check that's visible actually. Let's add a visible step there. And then why don't we actually go to this basket as well? I'll add one more assertion here on the shopping basket header to prove that I've ended up where I need to be. And then just finally, I'm going to click on proceed to checkout. So it's going to record that for me. And there we go. So I'm at the start of having to sign in now. Now this is where I'm going to draw a close to the test. I'll just do a right click on this guy up here, present, good stuff. All right, I'm going to stop recording that test now. I can use the context menu here for the open step just to close this browser. I can close this step. So in a very short space of time, we've built a feature, we've built a new scenario, I've defined my given when then steps, and I've recorded a user journey directly into those steps on my file system. Okay, so the other thing I can do just finally before running is to come in here and just give this test, either the feature, the scenario itself, or an example, a new tag. Okay, we use tags within the framework to include and exclude certain tests at runtime. Okay, so if I come out of this now, I've recorded my test. What we can see in my features presentation is that the scenario, the feature and scenario I've just created is now present in Flare. Okay, so I can choose this for running. So I'm going to use this new tag. And what you'll see now, that tells me I've got one feature, one scenario. And let's go through and start looking at how we're going to run this. Okay, so the next thing we see in Flare are all of the run parameters that we have available to us. So very simply, I'm going to choose a browser. I'm going to make this a local browser, but you do see that we have a number of other integrations to these other providers if you're using some of these tools for your non-functional testing. So you simply pop in your API key and you can immediately run this test against some of these other vendors. We're going to do this as a desktop test. I'm going to work with Firefox, and then even at that lowest level, I have a number of choices I can make with regards to the specifics of the browser. Whether I need to close it at the end of the test, whether I want to use the same browser for a number of tests in succession, whether I want to maximize it or resize it. These are all options that I have available to me, as well as certain timeouts. Okay. So on the right hand side, I have my inventory telling me the choices I've made. I'm going to click on next. And then finally, I just get a choice of some reporting. So I'm going to choose to see a local test run report. And then just in preparation for showing you some real-time cloud reporting in a second, I'm also going to enable our dashboard reporting as well. So I'm just going to come in here, pop in my API key here. And then I'm going to use a label here. All right, so let's just call this new webinar label. All right, we use labels to give a test or a series of tests a sense of purpose. All right, so it's almost like a descriptive factor. So you might have something like smoke tests. You might have critical tests on your QA environment. You might have mobile iOS, you might have mobile Android, for example. It's a completely free text field, but it will start to group those tests together, which you'll see in a second. I'm publishing to a particular project in Test Evolve Halo, so I have to have that. And then I'm going to run this test. Let's see how we do. So it's going to fire open Firefox. All right, that'll be the first thing it does. Here we go. It's going to maximize that. It's going to go to code.uk. It's going to search for Christmas tree. All right, it's going to run a bunch of checks. It's going to select that first product. It's going to run a few more page assertions. It's added it to basket. We've gone to the basket, and now it's taken us to the point of signing in. All right. So that test has passed, right? That's running a touch under 19 seconds. So within 5 minutes or thereabouts, we've built this up from scratch and proven that we can run that. Okay. I selected to see a test run report. So this is my first indication, other than the console output, that has been successful. Okay. But what I wanted to do really is to start showing you how this is going to start to manifest in your actual project, your automation project. All right, so let's actually load this up, webinar demo, in your text editor. Okay, so you actually start to get a feel for what the recorder's doing and what it's doing on your behalf. Okay. So if you remember, we created a new feature, all right? We called it Amazon Checkout Flow. And within that, we created a scenario called Checkout Step Def. We created 3 steps within that. And there they are. We go to the site, we search, we add to cart, and we begin the checkout flow. This is what we call the top layer of the framework, or the business-facing layer, all right? It's the layer that contains our features and scenarios. Now we've actually written some code or recorded some code, I can step into the next layer down, okay? So this is what we call the step definition layer, all right? So this is where it actually starts to become reality in terms of generating this Ruby and this water code for you. So you're going to end up with your given, your when, and your then steps in the same step definition file, okay? We're generally instructing the browser on the things that we want it to do. So most commonly, you're going to see this reference to test-evolve.browser, okay? And then a series of instructions. So the first thing we did was simply instructing the browser to go to amazon.co.uk, all right? So that's the entirety of our given step. If we look at the when step, you'll remember that we very quickly with we clicked in the text field, we entered a search, and then we executed that search, right? So that translates into 3 lines of code here, all right? So we've got test-evolve.browser at the beginning of all of those, but the recorder has looked at the application and said, right, that's a text field, and it has an ID, and this is the unique identifier. That is the ID. When you find that, click on it, okay? And then using the same elements, so the same text field with the same reference, I want you to set some text. I want you to set the string of Christmas tree, right? This is our search term entry. And then finally, we executed that search. So beside it was the magnifying glass. That's a button, and that has an ID of this, another unique ID. So the recorder, when it's been looking at you clicking through the application, has retrieved and stored this information. And it's turned it into a series of generated Ruby code for you within your step definition. What we also did along the way multiple times was this idea of raising checkpoints whilst we're recording the test. So you'll recall that the first thing I did, once I'd submitted my search and I got a results listing page, I wanted an indication that I was correctly on that page as expected. So we looked at the results filtering component in the top right-hand corner. So the test-evolve recorder has captured that as a span, and it has a class. Let's not do that. Sorry, let's just undo that. And it has a class of this, and it's asking the question, is it present? So to turn this into an assertion, we simply say, raise an error with whatever message you choose to give it here. So in this case, the recorder is saying, span was not present on the page before the timeout, okay? So raise this error unless the thing that you're looking for is present on the page, all right? So this is the basic structure of how we raise these functional assertions, okay? Now, there's 2 main problems with, or 2 reasons why this isn't the best practice approach, okay? So this is what I refer to as the step definition approach, okay? So what we've actually done, we've recorded a journey on the Amazon application, but it's written all of our code directly to our step definitions, but it's done it in a way that's not especially reusable if you've got a team with multiple testers, okay? So what I mean by that, so we've got Dylan and Andy on the call, right? So if I'd recorded this test and I'd committed this code to our source control, Andy could come along and he could write a test and he could use this same when step in his scenario, okay? That would be perfectly fine and that would work. The problem's going to come is if Andy decides this does almost what he needs it to do, but actually he wants to make a change to that. He wants to add another assertion, or actually he wants to remove a line. Okay, if Andy does that, he's actually going to break that step for my test as well. So I was the original person to record or write this test. And it's conceivable that someone else, by reusing it, could actually break that for me. So that's one of the first, that's really the first issue, right? The second issue of equal, if not more so, more importance is that if we look at some of these elements, so this element itself has been written on 2 lines, right? We've got it on line 1 here, so text field with the ID of 2-tab search text box. We also see it in the next line, okay? let's assume that there is a change to the way in which we need to reference that component. Okay, so you know, we need to put the word text at the start of the string and, you know, not halfway through. Well, if we've recorded hundreds and hundreds of tests in this manner, and I then need to make that change, I'm going to have to make that change in hundreds of places. Okay, we're going to look at an approach now which pays reference to the page object model. Okay, and you'll see how, you know, why this is considered a best practice thing to do. All right, so let's come back to Flare. And I'm going to come back and I'm going to record a new test. This time I'm going to pay reference to the page object model. So new feature, so we'll call it Amazon Flow, and we'll call it POM, page object model. This is our feature. This is our scenario. Checkout with page object model. That's fine. Yep. Given when then steps the same, are broadly speaking going to be exactly the same. So given I launch the Amazon site, when I pick a product to purchase, then I can begin checkout. Now, see, this is what happens if you use the same step, right? So I used exactly the same step, then I can begin the checkout flow. So Flare understands that someone has already defined a step. So I can now say, oh, actually, that's not the one I want. So I can delete that, okay? It's going to tell me, am I sure? Yep. So I go back to just having my given and when. So let's redefine a then step. Then I begin my checkout flow. Excuse me, to payment. All right, that's now unique. It's going to give me the option to record a new version. Okay, so let's look at this again. So given I launched the Amazon site, right, let's start recording with reference to the page object model now. So the first thing I'm still going to do is to launch the site. So I'm going to start recording and I'm going to click go, and straight away, there you go, it's recorded that step. That is the wrong URL. Okay, that's a good example of how we may need to delete a step. So let's try that again. www.amazon.co.uk. Right, there we go. That's better. There we go. All right, cool. So it's loaded my page. Now I'm going to come into the when step because this is where we start to interact with the application. But what you're going to see now, we've got this drop-down list flashing at us in the top left-hand corner. So this is going to allow me to pick from any existing page classes I have in my automation project, or to create a new one. Now, the page object model, the basic idea is that if I'm on a home page of the application under test, which I am here, I should have a representative home page in my automation project, okay? And then the things that I do on this home page within Amazon, for example, so submitting the search, the elements that I need to save, I do that within the home page in my automation project. All right, so we start to see some isolation and some kind of synchronization between the elements and the methods and the thing that we're doing as a user within our automation project that really start to match the way in which you use it in reality. Okay, so let's create a new page. We're going to call this the home page. Okay. Flare is going to do everything it needs to build that file out for you. So I create page. And now what you're going to see, so when I start to initiate this search again, I'll click on that. So it's still recording my steps in the same way, but now it's paying reference to the idea of a home page, okay? And it's a specific element on that home page now, all right? So let's just go through that flow quickly. Let's do exactly the same thing as we did last time. I'm on a new page now, so I'm on a results listings page. So I'm going to create a new page. In fact, we'll just call that results listings. Yep, okay. Right, so there's a new page there. So one of the things I did was to run an assertion here. So let's make sure that's present. We'll slim this one down slightly. So I'm going to pick a product to purchase. So I'm going to click on this guy here. There we go. And what we can see here on the left-hand side is that things are being written to my results listings page now, as opposed to just the step definition file. All right, let's add an assertion here. We're on a new page again, right? So we're now on the product detail page. So let's create that. In fact, I'm not going to put page in it. I'm just going to say product details. I create that page. So what Flare's doing, it's building an association between certain pages in the application under test and the things that you're doing. So if you ever come back to the home page, it's going to know that you're on the home page, and it's going to write them to the appropriate file within your project. All right, so let's come into our then step at this point. Let's just add a quick assertion here. Verify present. Good, we're just going to add that to cart. We'll add a quick assertion here. And I'll tell you what also we're going to do. So I mentioned about accessibility and Lighthouse checks. Okay. Now these are done at a page level, not a component level. All right. So whilst I'm in here, so I'm in the add to basket page, I can right click, and you will have seen here that above my element verification options, I have audit check as an option, and I have visual check as an option. So I'm going to do an audit check here. I'm going to give it a label again to denote a sense of purpose, or more likely with an accessibility check referencing the page that I'm on. So we'll call this the basket confirmation, basket confirm. All right, so I add that check, and you can see now on the left that an audit check has been added to my test, and then I will just go to basket at that point. And we'll do one final assertion. We'll just check that that shopping basket is there. Good. And that will do us. Let's stop recording. Let's close that browser. Let's give it a tag. We'll call that POM, page object model tag. We'll enter that. Good. So let's just quickly look at what that does in reality. In fact, let's run that first. Let's choose the POM tag. So let's find that test that we've just recorded with respect to the page object model. We'll look at the next step, but this time I'm going to run it as an audit test. So I'm going to run it with Axe. So we'll look at an accessibility check because we added that line of code, that verification, to our recorded test. Click on local, desktop, Firefox. So just setting it up to run again, and let's run that test. We're still pushing data to our dashboards, but also our run report. Let's run that and see how we go. So it's still going to fire up Firefox. It's going to run in much the same way, but we'll look at the accessibility output, and we'll look at the code itself this time. That will be the fundamental difference. Cool. All right, that test has passed. That took a little longer this time because it's incorporating an accessibility check, right? But let's have a look at the run report. So there we go. We know that was successful. I'm going to flick very quickly to Halo because you haven't seen that yet. Let's come in here. So I'm just going to sign in again. There we go. Right. So the first place that new data is going to come into Halo. So this is our real-time dashboard platform. You'll remember that I was using a label for all of these tests that said new webinar label. We've done two types of tests. The first one was run purely as a functional test. So we end up with a dashboard that looks like this. And then the time we've just done it with the page object model, we ran it as an accessibility check. So we have another run card here. And actually we start to see some accessibility scoring for the particular page of the application where we ran that check. Okay, so what I'm going to show you now is understanding the difference in the code that's generated here. Okay, so we created this feature. We still have the next level down. Okay, but you'll remember that what we were doing was building certain pages that referenced the pages in the application that we are on. So we had an equivalent page in our automation project. So when we're on the home page, our commands now look like this. Okay, so we now reference home page instead of test-evolve.browser. And the elements that we were interacting with were given a unique identifier, and then we just fire the command against it. So we're simply saying, look for the element that we refer to as this on the home page and click. All right, same thing here. Look for the element declared as this on the home page and set text in that text field. Now, what this gives us is a third layer to the framework. All right, so we now have a supporting page, a page class. Okay, so I can step into this page class here. All right, and what you'll see is that the two elements that we interacted with on the homepage of the Amazon site, it was the text entry, the text field for the search, and then the search execution button beside that. So they are now stored as unique elements, Selenium elements, if you like, within a dedicated page class in our project. In this case, it's the home page. All right, and what you also see here is the association to that particular URL. So everything we're doing on the amazon.co.uk page is now referred to as the home page. All right, so that means, coming back to that scenario where there's a breaking change to this element, I now don't need to change that element in multiple places because my reference or my map to that element is here. Okay, and this piece doesn't actually change. If I need to fix it, I'm going to be making a change somewhere in this definition here. So I go from having potentially to make changes in hundreds of places in the worst case scenario to actually making a fixing change in just one single place, right? So hopefully this is an indication of why using this page object model is a good thing. Okay. The other idea is that, yes, this now creates the ability for other testers on the project to use these same objects in methods that they create. So they could very quickly build out their own scenarios that had lines of code like this. So .click on a certain element, .set text. And we're going to look at other options that you have in just a second as well. What I want to show you quickly is just an introduction to the idea of these accessibility checks. So I ran that as an accessibility test. The flow, the user journey was no different, but I just added a check-in, okay? But I now get an HTML report that I can, let's look at that in Chrome. All right, so we talked about traceability and transparency. So I have my feature name, I have my scenario name, I have my given when then steps, right? So it's still incredibly readable to everybody that's involved. It's going to show me the URL of the place in which I made this change. I gave that audit check a label of basket confirm, you'll remember. And when I then expand that, I now have a very, very detailed list of exactly why that accessibility check on that particular page has failed. Now, the first thing really actually to take note of is the level of failure. So we get a summary up here. So we had 0 critical, 5 serious, 2 moderate, 1 minor. But you get a detailed report here, something you can raise in a Jira ticket, you can talk to your developers about. I'm just going to pick on one here. So this is deemed a serious issue. This is a color contrast issue. It tells me the exact element, the source. I have instructions on how that needs to be fixed. But if I really want to start educating myself as a tester who's getting into accessibility as well as automation, I can actually open this link here, which is going to take me to really the accessibility library with the rules. And it's going to start to give me a real in-depth understanding of why this is a problem. Okay, so there's a load of information in there. What I really like is this widget in the bottom right-hand corner that simply says, yes, this is a serious issue. It's really good because it tells you exactly the types of impairments or disabilities that might be affected by this issue on your website. It tells you exactly the international standards that you are not compliant with by virtue of the fact that you have these violations. So in this case, it's referring to the AA standard of both WCAG levels 2.0 and 2.1. All right, and it tells you this is an absolute must to be compliant. But really, as far as terms of automation, it's just the knowledge that you can very quickly add these additional types of checks into your code, right? Which is a really powerful thing to do to expand the use of your testing. All right. Now, very quickly, I'm going to show you, let's go to Flare again. I'm going to show you a feature we have on our .com website, which is another great way of getting educated and starting to train and get familiar with other types of elements that you're going to come across when you're testing your own applications. All right. So let's just build out a very quick feature here. We're going to call this the trainer. Okay, new scenario. Okay, navigate the trainer page. All right, I'm just going to do one step here. So given I navigate the trainer page. All right, so the trainer page is when we first open the browser here. So if I start recording, the trainer page is the page that loads here. All right, so it's a page on our site, so .com/element-capture. All right, this is great because you can, if you just start recording here and we kind of go to, so we capture the launch of that page. But this page is built with a number of different things, right? So we have an example link that we can click on here. All right, we have a button here with click me text. We have a text field of which, sorry, let's click on it. Of which I can set some text and then tab out of that. We have some radio buttons, so you can click into a radio button. You can see all the while I'm doing this on the left-hand side, it's recording these steps for me. All right, and then we have a checkbox there. All right, we've got a drop-down list, select list. There we go, so I can pick an option from that. All of these things are being caught along the way, okay? So let's stop recording that. Close down that browser. Awesome. All right, let's come back to the code that's actually been built for us. So we look at the trainer feature. It was just one very simple scenario, simple step there. We're clicking that. And you just start to get a feeling for some different types of elements you're going to come across when you're writing code for your applications, right? So we've seen what the go-to command looks like. When we looked at a link this time, so the recorder's actually captured that as an A, right? And we use a data test tag with a unique value of example link, and then we click on that. All right, so you see a pattern here. Okay, so we have a button. Data test tags is something you can talk to your front-end developers about implementing them for you. You know, the idea being that they're always going to be there. They shouldn't really break that often unless they're intentionally changed. All right, so we have a button with a data test tag of example button. So we click on buttons. We've looked at text fields, radio buttons. We refer to them as browser.radio. Again, we're looking at the data test tag, and here we've got example radio 1. So we do two things with the radio button. We click on it, and then we're actually setting a value. So we had a group of radio buttons there. We had 3 together, and it's navigating that by setting value 1 in the radio buttons. All right. And then just finally a checkbox and a select list. So checkbox, we refer to browser.checkbox, and we run the command of check. That's a method we run against that. And whether you're checking or unchecking the box, you're going to use that command check. If it's already checked and you run check, it's going to uncheck it. If it's unchecked and you run the check command, it will check it. All right. So you need to be aware of that starting position on a particular checkbox. And with the select option, with the select list, we're referring to that as browser.select. Again, we're using a data test tag. We have a unique value of example select, and then we're doing, it's a two-step process, right? So we click on that to expand the list, and then we are selecting an option to value from that list. All right, so there's a little bit about the page object model and using the trainer guide as well, just to understand what some of these other commands are going to start to look like. I'm going to show you, running a little low on time, so I'm going to show you just one final thing. Let's look at our checkout flow feature, right? This was the first one we looked at. So we mentioned the use of cucumber tables. Okay, so how can I take this effectively, this single test right now, and turn it into something that will receive data, you know, multiple sets of data, and run that test multiple times. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is convert this to a scenario outline, and I need to supply this with an examples table. Okay, now there's two things I want to drive on here. I want to drive a different URL and a different product across 3 tests, right? So let's go in here. We'll say URL here, and we'll put product in here. We're going to do the same thing on, in fact, let's put it in the first example there. So URL firstly will be the first one we did. And then first product was Christmas tree. All right. So I just want to expand upon this now. So let's just drop in here. We'll do a couple of examples. We'll do second time round, we'll go to .com instead of .co.uk, and second time round, we will look for decorations instead of Christmas tree. And then third time round, we will go to maybe the French version of the site, okay? And we'll still search in English. My French is not that good. And we'll search for Christmas lights instead, all right? So I start building out this examples table. But right now, my steps within these scenarios don't know to do anything with that, okay? So I've got to establish a link between the steps and the examples that I'm now passing through. So the first step is just concerned with the URL. So I established the link to the table by adding this under that, okay? And then the when step is where we're doing the product selection. So similar thing, I'm going to add in here reference to product. And under here, I'm going to put these chevrons in. Again, I'm going to reference to product. And what that's doing is building the link to the table that sits underneath that. So now everything at the feature level is set as it needs to be. It was formerly a single test. It's now set up to be parameterized with 3 different sets of values. So this will run 3 times. But I have to make some amendments to my step definitions. Okay, so what I need to do is pass through that table from my feature. I'm just going to add something here. So table.hashes.each do, and then I'm going to refer to that as a line. I'm just going to close that Ruby block. Okay, and what I'm going to do now, I'm going to replace this string of amazon.co.uk with something that I'm passing in from that table. Okay, so I refer to each individual line when it passes them through the table as a line here. And then I'm going to use the keyword of URL so that the browser go-to is now going to extract that value from this feature table instead. Okay. Now I need to do the same thing in the then step. So we really only need to do that around the place where the value is needed. So in this is here is the search term. All right, so we'll do a similar thing. We'll come up here. We'll run that as table. Copy this line from the top. And we'll put an end block there. All right. So now I'm getting ready to pass through the different types of products to this, the setting of the search term here. All right. So we are going to refer to that as line, square brackets, and therefore we've got product. All right. So that's really all we need to do now. So for those 2 steps, I'm now simply extracting the URL from the table and I'm extracting the product from the table as well. But we're telling the step definitions instructing them, allowing them to be able to receive this table into the step definition, extract that value, and to let the test continue. All right, so let's just have a look back here. All right, so that's how we then start to parameterize our tests. Let's just run it from the IDE actually. So I'll look at my default config here. I'm going to run this. I'm going to run this in Firefox. That's fine. So you can run tests from your text editor or from Flare, as you've seen. I'm going to run this as a Firefox test. That's all I really need to do now. So let's come back here. I'm just going to right click on my checkout, my scenario outline. Let's run that test. One thing I haven't done just yet, as this was a new project, I just need to let RubyMine know which Android SDK it needs to work with. So Ruby SDK and gems 2.74. Let's apply those changes. Okay. All right, cool. Let's try that again. There we go. So it's going to run those tests directly from the IDE this time. We're still going to open up Firefox. There we go. So this time it's going code.uk and it's searching for Christmas tree. And it's going to run the rest of the test. Okay. Second time round, it's going to go .com. And we are going to search for Christmas decorations. All right. The rest of the test is the same. So it's still going to select a first product. It's going to attempt to run some checks and add that to cart. Okay. So that has been successful. And third time round, we are going to go to the French version of the site, the French locale. We're looking for Christmas lights. I have no idea what the search term will return. but it doesn't seem to have had a problem there. But we can start to see the user flows different here. So actually, that third test has now failed. Okay, not surprisingly, the flow in the actual application is different. But you start to see how you can parameterize your test and start to inject data and run a single test multiple times to actually drive more coverage. All right, I'm conscious of time, so what I want to just finally show you is just the idea of traceability to your requirements. Okay, so we had been running these tests, okay, and now outputting to the Halo cloud dashboards. All right, I showed you, I'm going to show you something with some more meaningful data. So let's look at something like this. Okay, so right now we work with 4 different types of payloads. We have visual testing. Okay, we've looked at accessibility today. In another session, we'll take a deeper dive to look at visual testing, because we have 3 means of doing that. We have local visual testing with TestEvolve Spark. We can work with an Applitools eyes integration. We can also integrate with Percy from BrowserStack. In terms of audits, as we said, we can offer Lighthouse, but also accessibility audits. Okay, so just looking at some more meaningful data here. When you've got a serious number of scenarios and features, or features and scenarios, this is what you're going to see in your dashboards, all right, your run view. Now, the key thing about the run view, the real-time dashboards, it's all well and good when tests are passing, that's fantastic. So we see it feature by feature down here. But what we're more concerned with is when things are failing, right? And when we need to troubleshoot something, when we've got to diagnose something. So what we do here is that the failing test will be elevated always to the top. All right, so if I look at these, I can click into these, I can start to drill down and understand with the stack trace exactly where the problems may be. And in this particular case, it's a timeout issue on a certain element. Now, we will be adding screenshots to these as well in due course. We have a Jira integration, so you can raise bugs immediately from these reports. But the traceability aspect is key, right? So if you're running 1,000 tests, these are your feature names, right? So they should be constructed in a meaningful way, something that has great relevance to all of your business stakeholders for the application that you're developing and you're building. And then when you see these failures at a feature level, you can then step in. And we talked about having traceability to the requirements, the step definition. So we see a scenario name, we see the given when then steps. So when you have a failing test, you have the stack trace, and ultimately you have the screenshots as well. But you're in no uncertain terms about exactly where that problem is, right? So this is, several steps more advanced than just having the idea of an email that goes out and says you've got 207 passing tests and you've got 152 failing tests without any real kind of context or risk analysis. So these dashboards are really powerful to kind of enable you to do that. What they give you is a trend analysis here as well over a period of time. And we have a run history here for any of your previous runs. So if you want to go back, last week, 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago, and start understanding where tests may have begun to fail in greater quantity, it's going to allow you to do that. All right, just finally, so we've covered a lot of ground there. We are going to have a follow-up session probably before Christmas, and another one almost certainly in the new year. We'll take some of these coding elements, standards to a new level. So we'll look at more parameterization. We'll look at starting to work with methods in your page classes. We'll look at code reusability. But this is a really quick way, as I'm sure you've seen, by using the recorder, of going from having nothing to working with Ruby and Cucumber and Selenium and being able to build some tests really quite quickly. So we have a 90-day evaluation period right now. If you want to get involved and start working with us, if you come to testevolve.io/signup, you can come here, you can create your organization space. All right, so you just come in, you drop in a company name. So as we see here, that's going to give you a preview of what your domain will be. So you can kind of test a few different company names there to build out your domain. Put in kind of your official company name here, put in your email address if you're going to be the administrator for your organization. You will then receive a secure email token. Okay, so you can then set your password and login. You can invite new users. You can create your API keys. All of this stuff is covered in our documentation, our YouTube tutorials. But really, the first thing we showed you was that it's going to allow you to kind of come in here and pop into the download section and download the version of Flare that you need for your operating system to very quickly start recording your tests. Okay, so there we go. It's just after the hour. Covered a lot of ground there. So, once again, thank you very much for sitting patiently and listening. If you've been answering or asking even questions along the way, hopefully Dylan has been able to reply to you. Please do reach out to us at any of these. So GitHub.com or info@testevolve.com. We'll be only too happy to answer any questions you have. Or if you're having any kind of trouble setting yourselves up for evaluation, then of course we'll jump on a call with you as soon as we can and get you set up and get you up and running and kind of creating code very, very quickly. All right, so it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you very much. Dylan, I'm just going to come to you for a second. Was there anything finally we need to cover off before we call it a day?
No, not from me. Just use that if you've got any questions and stuff. Use that info@testevolve.com. Send them our way, and then we'll do our best to answer them.
Absolutely fantastic. So thank you very much. Yeah, guys, give it a try. Seriously, it's you can be up and running very, very quickly. If this is the challenge you've had, right? If you've not been able to make progress to date, and we say this from experience, we went through this journey, and this is why we've ultimately put this framework together. You can make serious progress very, very quickly. And then really you do become, you do start down this this journey of your own, with a coded framework. In this instance, Ruby. As I say, we can do this in JavaScript and TypeScript as well. All the features you've seen today are relevant to the JavaScript version of the framework as well. So we will do a session on this. I think maybe we take a deeper dive into accessibility and Lighthouse audits as well. We'll look at taking some of your code to the next level as well. And maybe we'll explore some of our integrations next time. But we'll have a session before Christmas. We'll have one in the new year. So yeah, stay tuned. Look out for notifications. There'll be a lot more of these to come. Yeah, let's work together. Let's get you evaluating. Let's get you kind of succeeding on your automation journey. So thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and we'll call it a day there.